Cloud. Okay, we're recording now, and I want to turn captioning on. Um, Looks like they've changed something here. Select language for captions. Well, we will see what happens. As near as I can tell, captioning has been changed. It is now automatic, or it is now, caption on is now the default, apparently. Last time I taught, it was not the default. So, we are recording, and everything should go right. Let me share a screen. Okay, as I said before, I haven't taught for a while. I haven't, things are pretty much together, but they're not 100% together. I'm going to use my slides from the winter of 2022, what few I have, and they're not entirely appropriate. I'll explain where they're not, but so welcome to the class. Oh, and one of the things I tend to do, let's see, is that I tend to run a session on a second computer. So in case my computer goes down or something, there's some hope of getting a hold of people on the second computer. My computers don't generally go down. Things are pretty reliable, but one of the things about running computer systems administration, is that you sometimes have to think of what can go wrong and guard against what can go wrong. Because if you're running an important system like a system connected to instrumentation under the Arctic Sea Pack, you can't afford not to get data from those instruments. I mean, it's your job. Literally, you will not be working if you don't get that data. So you really have to think about everything that can go wrong and be prepared for stuff that does. Be prepared to keep your systems up and running and have replacements if something goes down and things of that type. And I'm a little nervous today because I don't have all the backups and replacements that I should have, but it, we'll be fine. So first thing, let's go over the basics of the class. And and I'm glad to see people coming this morning. My lectures work much better when people come, and you get much more out of them because we get some interaction between us. First thing I want to do is let's go to our class and just look at the class a little bit and what we've got here. Okay, on the beginning page, it basically tells you how to get started with the class. It am I missing some things? Oops, I don't want that. I want this. Ah, I must have had that out of date from way back when. Okay. First item of business. You must make your presence known during the first week of class. I'm sure you've heard this before if you've taken PCC classes, because we mark people as no-show at the end of the week. They used to tell me I had to mark people as no-show on Saturday at the end of the first week. I think they've moved that to Tuesday now or something like that. But to show that you exist, make sure you introduce yourself in the discussion forum for introductions. If you just say, you know, one word and you've introduced yourself, a little more would be nice, but that's sufficient. Okay, next item. When you look at this, there will be, I hope everybody's familiar with Desire to Learn. Is anybody new to Desire to Learn? Okay,
I don't think I've heard of Desire to Learn before.
you've heard of it?
I don't think I have. No, sir.
Oh, okay. There are various what they like to call learning management systems, or there's some other word for it, a CMS, which stands for something else for me. I think it's course management system. And there's various open source ones and various commercial ones. Desire to Learn is one of the big ones. I Blackboard is another. Moodle is an open source one. There's quite a few out there. Desire to Learn is the one that Portland State University uses it too. It's the one that PCC uses. And basically, if a course is up in Desire to Learn, it will look like you go to the website that you can get to by logging on to, let's go here. You log on to PCC and it gives you a link to my PCC and you log on there. I don't know what happened. Normally things work out, except when you're in class. But you log on to the My PCC link. It will ask you for logon information, and one of the tabs on the left-hand side of the menu on that will say Bright Space, which I call Desire to Learn because they changed the name of it to Bright Space not too long ago. The name of the company that owns—
Excuse me, sir. I'm so sorry to cut you off. So Bright Space, I mean, Desire to Learn is basically Bright Space for PCC is what you're saying. If so, then yes, sir, I do know how to use Bright Space. Absolutely.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry. I said Desire to Learn because that was the old name. It's now called Bright Space, but it's owned by the company Desire to Learn. Okay, and you get a thing like this with tabs across the top here, and the main tab is, all the tabs are valuable. You've got your course tab here, which will have news in it. And then you get tabs that have the content for the course. There's a tab that has discussions, if there are discussions for the course. There's a tab for assignments, so on and so forth. Quizzes, our online sessions, grades, whatever. My screen may look a little bit differently than your screen because my screen is showing it as a teacher. So it's the screen that allows me to make changes and things like that and see things like everybody's grades. Okay, going back here. The condition of the course right now is I pretty much have module 1 completed. I think there may be a broken link or something in the assignment for module 1, but the assignment is, I might change a word or two in it, but basically the assignment is ready to go. Everything is ready to go there. So to get started for the course, the first thing we need to do is you need to get what the way the course is going to work is there's a textbook. Sorry, it's not on paper. It's not even a true ebook. It's integrated with a learning environment, which I will show you in a little bit. The upside of it is free. There will be a textbook, and the textbook, because it's integrated with the learning environment, it does have labs and stuff built into it. I don't care if you do those or not. Do as many as you think you need to do to learn the material, and it's up to you how much that is. And then the bulk of the course is build a computer using Linux, and we're going to use that computer for various things to learn to administrate computers. That computer, in most cases, what you will do is you'll use a product called VMware, which on your, say, your Windows computer or your Mac or whatever you have. I have a Linux box, so, but on your box, VMware will give you a subcomputer in your computer. And in that subcomputer, you can then load another operating system. And we'll talk about that as we go on. But that will allow you to load another operating system so you can run Linux on your computer, even though it's not a Linux computer, or Linux on your computer, even though it is a Linux computer, or whatever you want. So, you know, you don't have to do it using VMware, or I'm sorry, I said VMware. I'm sorry, VirtualBox. We at PCC, we use VirtualBox. I said VMware because VMware is a commercial competitor, a proprietary competitor to VirtualBox that is widely used across the industry. Anyway, we will be using a VirtualBox for the most part. If you have your own hardware, you know, you can do it on your own hardware. You don't have to do it on a virtual machine. There are other ways of doing it, but the way I will be doing it in class will be on a virtual machine. Okay, so we're going to take 2 forks then. Now, the first fork, to get signed up to use your textbook, what you have to do is, well, the first thing you need to do is go to course information and look at the stuff under course information. under course information, which you can also get to by going, well, I didn't mean to go that way, but okay. You can also go get to from the content tab. You'll find a welcome to the class. You'll find the class syllabus. Please read the syllabus. I know it's long and ugly, but it describes how we're going to run the class. Among other things, it describes the way I do grading, my classroom philosophy, and basically, I believe in having people do active things and do things that help you learn. And my preference is for doing things over reading about things. So, and also I do allow some creativity in the tasks that you take on, because I want tasks that will push you. So I expect more from one student than another student, because you may start at different levels. And that's fine. The other thing, I never grade students against one another. There's no grading on a curve. There's none of that business. So you are encouraged to help your fellow students. Computer requirements, if you're using VirtualBox, the bigger machine you have, the better you are. I don't know how small a machine you can get by with, but it doesn't have to be all that big. I mean, I've ran VirtualBox on machines with, well, certainly 8 gigabytes of RAM, no, 6 gigabytes of RAM, I know, and probably less. And well, disk is cheap nowadays. So, half a terabyte of disk, I don't know. It doesn't, it can be much smaller than that. And it doesn't have to be terribly fast. The more cores, the more CPUs you have, of course, the faster things will run. But you can get by with just one CPU or one core machine. They don't make those anymore. So, however, something like an Android or a Chromebook won't work. They really are too small. Oh, a Raspberry Pi. If anybody uses Raspberry Pis, I guess, you could use that as bare bones hardware and do the whole course on a Raspberry Pi. The prerequisite for the course is CS 140U or the equivalent. In other words, have some familiarity with Unix. If you don't, you have to work a little extra hard, and you'll know Unix by the end of the class. Someplace it talks about grades. Okay, the way I do the grading is off of, there's a certain number of discussions that you need to do. There are, and there's a lab every week. And instead of a final exam, we have a final presentation where you have to give me a little presentation, 15 minutes or something over Zoom. Or in person or something like that. They're typically done over Zoom. Okay. The other thing about the grading is, I guess most people grade 80 to 100 points is an I'm sorry, 90 to 100 point, a percent is an A. 80 and above is a B, so on and so forth. Notice I have a criteria over here that says, and have all assignments completed. I don't care what your score is. If you don't get everything in, you do not get an A. Likewise, you have to have most everything in to get a B. So, things have to get in. I do accept late work. Plagiarism. We'll say just a word about that. This is an open source class. Open source people work together. We work with people in competing companies. We work, and working with somebody is not plagiarism. Plagiarism is where you take another person's work and pawn it off as your own. As long as you give proper attributions, it is not plagiarism. If you do not give proper attribution, it is plagiarism. And that is becoming a much bigger issue now that we have this, the AI with things like Chat GPT. I don't know what my opinion is about Chat GPT. We didn't have much like that going the last time I taught this class. However, and I've been playing with it, and I don't know what to think. But if you use it, you must give proper attribution and don't pawn it off as your own work. And since I do expect you to be doing some work, using something from Chat GPT is like using something from Google. It is good input. It could be good input to give you ideas or whatnot on what you're doing. It is not the solution in and of itself, not until you use it and also then give some attribution that you did use it. And my experience with it has been very mixed. Sometimes it gives good results that are amazing. Sometimes it gives awful results. Okay, that takes care of that. The other thing we have under course information is the class schedule. The class schedule is all laid out here. Basically, there's a discussion every week, a assignment every week. Oh, and I use the word assignment and lab interchangeably for the same thing. And there's a couple special things like a little mini assignment for, to tell me what your final project is going to be. There's also one that says contact your instructor on a one-to-one basis sometime, and hopefully early in the term. And then all you have to do is put in, I contacted my instructor when you fill in the assignment. I like people to contact me on a one-to-one basis because I want to encourage you to contact me. A lot of people are shy about contacting their instructors. I do not want you to be shy about it. And you get 10 points for that. Oh, and for Thanksgiving week, the way we handle that is a catch-up week, where if you've got late work or whatnot, get it in, and basically take a couple days off to enjoy with your family and whatnot. Family is important, and so that's the way we handle the Thanksgiving in this class. There will be meetings just like normal during Thanksgiving week. Okay. Going back here. The next item of business is how do you get signed up for Red Hat Academy and all the Red Hat stuff? We're about to look at the instructions. It says down here that there is a little set of instructions on how to get signed up. I hope I wrote this okay. I had to rewrite a lot of this for this term, and I cut out a lot of stuff. In the past, we've done some things different. We use something called an NDG lab or whatnot. It was an external learning environment that doesn't exist anymore. If you see references to it throughout the course, ignore those because it does not exist. Instead, what we're using is labs ran or a learning environment that Red Hat itself has. To get signed up with that, the first thing you do is you go to redhat.com. Up here, and it says account, and well, if you're not logged in, it will give you an opportunity to make an account, and so you sign up making an account. Many of the things say to sign up using your PCC email. I'm not sure why they say that. Yeah, I do know why they say that. It is convenient for me if you use your PCC email, but any email works. The only thing is if you can obscure yourself to the point that I don't know who you are, but then I don't look at that very much, so that's probably okay. I know I use my own personal email account because I want it to last forever. Okay. That will give you an account. Going back here, once you get the account, that's just your Red Hat account for anything you do with Red Hat. If you want to buy $1 million of their services, that's the account you use. If you're not buying anything, that's still the account you use. If you want to look at their documentation, that's the account you use. The next thing is you want to become a Red Hat developer. So once you have gotten your account, then you go to developers.redhat.com. Let's see if I can do that. And when you go to that, it asks you to log in. I think this is it. Uh-oh. Yeah. Showing everybody my password, but that's okay. It asks you to log in, and then it will ask you for some more information that you have to fill out. I don't know why I have to do this, but oh, it accepted me, but it will ask you. I think it will ask you for more information. You've got a little bit more information to fill out. Not a big deal. You fill that out, and then it will bring up your page as a Red Hat developer. And I think up in here, there's, as I recall, the first time you do it, there's probably something on how you download Red Hat. Okay, let's go to products and technologies, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Oh, that lets you download Red Hat Enterprise Linux at no cost. So, and that will give you a DVD image, an ISO image. I hope you have a big DVD because it's 9 gigabytes. But that will give you an image of Red Hat, of the Red Hat software, free of charge. There are, if you read, as you should have read, all the descriptions, there are a lot of restrictions on its use. You can't use it to run your business or whatnot, or at least not if you've got a big business. There are a lot of restrictions on its use. It used to be you were only allowed to have one Red Hat machine or something. I think they've upped that limit to 16. But there's a lot of limits on what you're allowed to do with that. However, it is Red Hat. It is 100% Red Hat. It's the real software. It's not baby handicapped software. It's the real thing. You may want to look, I think my instructions say load Red Hat, use Red Hat. Now, or but you don't have to use Red Hat. And I will go into that. Anyway, that's the way you get Red Hat software. Now, once you have Red Hat software, and we will go back and we will talk about alternatives to Red Hat software. But once you have Red Hat software, then you go back here and you want to get access to the textbooks. Access to the textbooks is sign up for Red Hat Academy. To do that, you go to Academy. Well, this is not, you go to this URL, or you can also go to the URL academy.redhat.com, and that will take you to this page. And they both work. And at that point, you're in trouble. It won't work. I'm sorry. I screwed up. Okay, let's go back to the page here and let's read what it says. Email your Red Hat ID to your instructor along with your email address. The email address you use to get your Red Hat ID. Email those to your instructor, and your instructor will add you to his Red Hat Academy. Because his Red Hat Academy, what he has to do is he has to add you in as a student in his classes. And you will there will be 2 Red Hat classes for this class. Each one has a textbook, and we will be using both textbooks. We'll use the textbook from Red Hat 124 for the first half of the class, and from Red Hat 134 for the second half of the class. And what you do is once you get your Red Hat ID, you email me with the ID and the password, and then I can install you. And I do that promptly. And And once you do that, then you can go to academy.redhat.com, just like this link. And once you go there, you will see something that looks a lot like this. It will give you a list of the courses you're signed up for. Now, my list is longer than yours because I've been using this account for quite some time. But you will see 2 courses here. You will see the course Red Hat 124 and Red Hat 134. At 124 is the one we're going to use for the beginning of the class. If you go into that by hitting the launch key, once you have launched, something went wrong. I could tell something went wrong. Okay. Let's do academy.redhat.com. And this is the first time I've had something go wrong in a long, long time. So it's rare. Don't worry about things going wrong because they shouldn't. Okay. Now let's go into the course 124. Launch. Okay. And then we launch down here. It's bringing it up. Okay. Now, when it brings it up, what it gives you is under course, you have your textbook. And I know this isn't the friendliest way to read a textbook, but this is what we've got. And it's a decent textbook. They should have copies available in other formats, but they do not. They rewrote this textbook when Red Hat went from Red Hat 8 to Red Hat 9. They've done, as near as I can tell, they've done a pretty good job revising it and did a lot of work on it. And I've talked to Jeff Toobin from who runs the Red Hat Academy for Red Hat, and he says they haven't found a publisher for the book yet. So the books, they have an they used to have an EPUB format that was moderate cost, and they had a paper format that was expensive, but I bought them. Okay, and then basically you read your book. And this describes the lab environment for the course. I don't think we need to worry too much about the lab environment for this course because what we use is very simple. I think you probably would be doing all your work on Workstation. They actually give you a whole network because we also use this lab environment for teaching networking. This is exercises you can perform on their lab network if you go to lab environment. I think that takes you to lab environment. Nope. Oh, start. Oh, I probably don't want to do this because this takes a few minutes to come up. 5, 10 minutes, something like that. So anyway, we're going to leave that go, and we might come back to it, but and that gives you a lab environment where you've got an actual Linux machine that you can do certain things with. It's not an ideal environment from my point of view because all they mostly let you do things you need to do for your lab. So they don't have a lot of extra software on there, like a web browser. You can't go out to the web. You can't do this. You can't do that. But it can help you in reading the textbook. It is quite good for that. However, for the bulk of the class, we want to do that on our own machine where we've got, where you can network to the rest of the world and it will work just like a Linux machine in front of you. Okay. Any questions?
I just had a question. So you said we have to email you with our username and password that we created?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then because this is a class that it's at Red Hat. It's a Red Hat class, but the actual session is a section itself is my section as a so-called Red Hat instructor, and so I have to add you to the class.
Question though, the page says send you the username and the email address. Do you need our password though, for sure?
No, I don't need your password.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's what I asked.
No, I don't need your password. All I need is your name and your email address. The email address that you used with Red Hat to get your account. And what I do then is this, you'll never see this. This is the page that the instructor has. And edit class. I go into here and someplace in here, basically right there, I add your Red Hat ID, I add your address, I hit add students, and then I have to hit update. I got to hit 2 or 3 things, and then you're added to the class. So that's all there is to it. Okay. Going back, I'm going to go back and I am going to look at under course content, under module 1, we'll look at what I will do is I will put like the video of this class, I will put up in here someplace as soon as I get it made. I have left some old videos from previous classes. I don't know what I think about those because the class is changing a little bit from previous classes, but once in a while there's something useful in those, especially if for some reason it takes me more than a day or 2 to get the new video up. It does take me a little bit of time to get the new video up. Not too long, but okay. The next thing you need to do for this week is the first thing you did is that little thing introducing yourself. The second thing you need to do is the discussion, and in which basically all you do is you take one of these subjects or another subject you like that is sort of relevant to this week's topic. I'm not real picky on it, but I want you to take an interesting topic and write, like, well, I say 300 words. By 300 words, I mean something significant. I'm not going to count your words. And then you should respond to another student with, a little something more than, I want something more than I read your post. Although it doesn't have to be particularly profound. Okay, the topic for this week is, how does Linux relate to Unix? Does anyone actually use Linux? What is open source software? And why would anybody do anything that doesn't pay money? Actually, it does pay money. I've made a good salary off of open source software for my entire career, so, or at least a decent salary. Why on earth are there millions of Linux distributions? And tell me something about those. Compare the advantages and disadvantages of using virtual computers for Linux. A little more on virtualization and containerization, and and maybe a little bit on scrounging hardware or scrounging stuff. One of the good things about open source software, true open source software does not cost you money, no matter what you use it for. And I'm beginning to ask some questions about whether Red Hat is any longer truly open source. In fact, I'm not the only one asking those questions. Oracle is now suing Red Hat over that issue. But it's still, we still think of it as open source. But one of the powerful things about this is not having to pay for software and having software that will run on modest hardware enables people to do a lot of interesting things. If I'm working as a Peace Corps volunteer in Mali, which is a few hundred miles from Timbuktu, I may not have a whole lot of money, and open source software can be the answer for me. It does probably take a few more skills than closed source software, but it can provide powerful answers to a lot of problems, and can do it in a moderate cost. One of the things, as I say here, Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson, when they started Unix, they were young, unproven, well-paid people working for Bell Labs. And they didn't have any hardware. So they went scrounging down in the basement for hardware. They got an old PDP-7, it says here. I've never seen a PDP-7, but anyway, they got an old little mini computer. They brought it up, put it together, and they built an operating system for it because they couldn't afford one otherwise. Linus, when he was a graduate student at the University of Helsinki, he wanted to run Unix on a PC or on something he could afford, because he couldn't afford a real Unix computer. So he got the beginning of a kernel by Andrew Tannenborn called Minix. He rebuilt the kernel, which later somebody named Linux after Linus. And he had this kernel then running on his PC that wouldn't do much. There was a guy in France, Remy Card, wrote some software that would let the kernel talk to the hard disk. And before long, they had an operating system. But it was all off of scrounged hardware. So I just want to say, scrounging things can really be valuable. And if I look around at my office, I've got 4 or 5 machines here, and they're decent computers, but I guess 2 of them I bought new, to admit it, but the rest of them are all used. And actually, the 2 new ones are ancient. I bought them new, but that was like 2000. No, that was the last one I bought was probably 2010. So, okay. Now, the way your labs are done then is I write, and you turn in the labs by going to a lab Dropbox that looks like this, and they have no instructions in them. The instructions instead are in a separate file. I think a lot of instructors do this. And that will give you the instructions for your labs. Typically, the instructions for the labs are, and you can write up the labs any way you want, basically. Give them to me. I kind of prefer a PDF or a LibreOffice file, because I use LibreOffice to read things. And if you give me Microsoft Word, I will scream because that's proprietary software, and I'll read it and you'll be fine anyway. It's not that big a sin, but I probably will scream. Okay, the next thing is and the lab format or the write-up, think of yourself as writing up a status report for a job you have. They don't have to be real specific. They have to tell me what's happening. And if you fail and something doesn't work, write it up. This isn't working. Because, if I'm in a job environment and I may have to turn in a weekly report on my team or whatnot, and if something isn't working, I'm not going to hide it. I'm basically going to ask for more resources, because, I would get into trouble if I hide things too long and it, and then at the last minute, everything, the building is up and I'm not prepared to move in because I screwed up. So, so there's a little blurb in the course information tab module on how to do lab write-ups. But the basic idea is give me the status of things, give me, what is, there's usually a section here on someplace on deliverables. Give me the deliverables. And if you can't give me a deliverable, tell me why you can't give me the deliverable. Or once in a while, something just isn't something I may ask for something that doesn't fit your situation, because maybe I ask you to do something using VirtualBox and you're using bare bones hardware, or something of that type, in which case you just have to kind of change it to fit your situation, and that's fine with me. I'm cool with that in most cases. Oh, here I've still got a couple references to NDG Labs, which don't exist. So I need to reword this just slightly. But the assignment is quite usable as it is, even though I think there's a couple words that need to be changed here or there. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some content. Let's be back. It's now 9:57. Let's be back by 10:05. Okay? Anybody have any comments? How many people use Linux?
I used Linux last term, but we only had to use PuTTY, so we didn't really have to use the virtual machine.
Yeah, I mean, PuTTY is fine, but it doesn't. Yeah, my complaint is it doesn't give you the real feel for the way people use Linux.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think last year I also had it downloaded on one of the virtual machines, but I wound up getting a new computer, so it's been a while.
Yeah, and I will also say, even on a virtual computer, Linux doesn't perform well. Windows either. I don't care because you're using a virtual computer. It can perform. It can feel pretty good, but it doesn't perform like it would on bare bones hardware. Virtual computers now are good enough that, well, for a long time we used them in production applications extensively. But the graphics support on virtual computers is not as good as the computing support. So they do move a little slower than if you're on the bare bones hardware itself. They're not bad though. They're pretty good. What distribution did you use?
Oh, I can't remember. I'd have to look. I wrote it down somewhere.
Okay. Trying to think of what we should talk about next.
You have a few machines that I run Linux with just to play with. And some are Linux based. They're not entirely their own just Linux distributions.
Okay. What distributions by chance?
For a normal desktop experience, I like to use Ubuntu.
Okay.
And then I have a machine that runs, I think it's Debian based, but it's a complete it's something else. It's just based on Debian, I believe.
Yeah, there are slugs of distributions based on Debian.
The main one I'm using is called TrueNAS, and it's a NAS operating system
Oh, yeah.
and a hypervisor.
I've heard of that. Yeah. There's also FreeNAS, I believe.
That's just the older name for it. It's still the same thing. They just changed the name.
Okay. I haven't actually used that myself, but it's got a good reputation. A lot of companies use that, actually. Okay. Let us begin again. I guess
I remember now. It was Kali Linux.
Oh, okay. Kali Linux, I believe, is all I think is I haven't used that much. I think it's also Debian based. A lot of people really like Kali Linux that deal in computer security. It's got a lot of forensics software built into it. I personally have not used it very much. I will say the distribution that you will see sitting in front of you that I use a lot is OpenSUSE. Nobody else in the rest of the world uses it, but actually that's not quite true. Nobody else in the rest of America uses it, but I like OpenSUSE a lot. it isn't widely used in America. It is kind of the juggernaut of European computing. It's used extensively in Europe, especially Germany. But I like it. It is a little weird in that it doesn't, most of the distributions either fit the Red Hat line of doing things or they fit the Debian line of doing things. Most of our distributions are one or the other. OpenSUSE is sort of kind of Red Hat, but not really. In your assignment, I will talk about using a Red Hat-like distribution. And we'll talk about distributions just a little bit here before we talk about other things. But I'm not up to date on everything, but let me say that 2 or 3 years ago, Red Hat has been a great company. And Red Hat was founded by Bob Young and Mark Hewing, I think it is. Mark is the technical person. I think he dropped out of Red Hat long ago. Bob was the business person, and I know Bob Young a little bit. I've been on the same stage with him at times. He's a good guy, and he dropped out a number of years ago. And so they were both disappeared from Red Hat, but they really set what Red Hat was supposed to be, and they did a good job, and they are good, loyal, open source people, and they set Red Hat on the course of being an open source, a good, outstanding open source company. I will say that another company, a big, huge, ugly company that was horrible during the 1960s and 70s, they were the evil empire, is IBM. IBM, by the 1990s, when Linux took off, had learned their lessons and did well with the open source community and have been a good, loyal member of the open source community. And it's tough for a big company to do that. And I think really highly of IBM as a result. As it happens, IBM purchased Red Hat 3 years ago or so. For a bundle of money, like, I don't know, 20 billion. It was a lot of money. And since then, Red Hat's been doing strange things. Recently, and very recently, Red Hat changed their license, where they're claiming that you're not allowed to redistribute their open source software or use their open source, the source code to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. As I understand, I haven't read all the details. I don't know all of this, but it strikes me what they're doing is a violation of the GPL, the general public license that Red Hat is, or that Linux is licensed under. And I'm annoyed with them over that, even though they've been a good company. In any case, there are 2 categories of distributions, as I say. Well, 3 categories. There are actually maybe more than that, but we'll say there are the Red Hat category of distributions that I call Red Hat-like or Red Hat-ish or something of that type. They use a package management system called RPMs which used to stand for Red Hat Package Management. And these distributions are all fundamentally based off of something that looks like Red Hat. Okay. The other set of distributions are Debian-based distributions that use a package manager called DPKG, I think it is, or .deb. .deb is easier. And that would be distributions like Debian, Kali Linux, Ubuntu, Linux Mint, slugs of distributions. And then the Red Hat distributions are distributions like Fedora, CentOS, CentOS Stream, Rocky Linux, Almar Linux. And there's a slug of others, but lesser known ones. And then there are distributions that just don't fit any category. OpenSUSE, I don't know, or SUSE Linux and OpenSUSE Linux, I don't know where to put those. I would say they're almost Red Hat-like, but not enough for our course. They use RPMs, but they use them in ways that Red Hat does not use them. So they don't really fit. Gentoo, Arch Linux, there's a whole slug of Linuxes that don't really fit either of the categories I mentioned. And then there are operating systems that I don't know whether I should call them Linux or not, because they may use pieces and portions of Linux without using the whole thing. Notable among those is Android, the thing on your telephones. It uses a Linux kernel, but you don't see much else, much more Linux there. Okay. If you're just playing with distributions, there are a few places that you can go for distribution list. One is called.
What do you recommend for our course, though? I see a bunch listed, but
I would recommend either Red Hat or Almar Linux. Okay.
Sorry, I was just a little confused. I thought
Nope.
I was talking about distributions that we had to use on our virtual machines.
Well, for the purposes of our course, what I would, on one hand, I say use what you want to use. On the other hand, I would say if you really want to follow our textbook closely and you really want to, if you want our textbooks to work 100%, use a Red Hat-like distribution. The first one, my first choice would be Red Hat Linux. Actually, my first choice might be Almar Linux because that's the one I'm using. But then I'm a philosopher and I'm a little ticked off at Red Hat at the moment. Red Hat Linux is good. You'll find it, it's probably, if you're looking for a job, knowing Red Hat Linux is good. Almar Linux and Rocky Linux are really clones of Red Hat Linux. They really, really, truly are. Let me give you some history here. In the old days, there was a Red Hat Linux, and it was open source. They gave it away. They didn't charge anything. There was none of this license business. And then they decided they had to make some money, more money some which way. So when they tried to put in licenses and whatnot, they renamed their Linux Fedora. So Fedora is really a Red Hat Linux. Fedora uses I forget what Fedora uses as their logo. It's not a red fedora because that's what Red Hat uses. And the reason for that is Bob Young always used to wear a red fedora. Anyway, they renamed their distribution Fedora, and that was their working distribution that they would do development on. So it was a little less stable because everything would change on it. Once everything was really tested and rock solid, they called that Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So what Red Hat Enterprise Linux has been is it has been Fedora made rock solid. And by made rock solid, that just means it's tested and everything is tested and worked out. Whereas Fedora, you're still working on things a little bit, so it's a rock solid distribution, but not nearly as rock solid as Red Hat. So if I'm running a big, huge array of computers, if I'm running a small business, I might use Fedora. It's fine. If I'm running a big array of professional computers, I'm going to use Red Hat because, I don't want people after me because there was some bug that I didn't catch or whatnot. Now, some people didn't like the charges of Red Hat, so they started a new distribution called CentOS. And Red Hat, as I say, is a nice, friendly company that works with people. So they actually started working with the CentOS people. But what CentOS was, is they took Red Hat Enterprise Linux, they took the red fedoras out of it, they took the name Red Hat out of it, they took all the intellectual property rights that Red Hat put into Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and they republished it as CentOS Linux. So CentOS Linux was being built from Red Hat Linux, or from Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It was a very, very good Linux. All scientific users used it instead of using Red Hat Linux. Red Hat was fairly happy with that. They actually helped develop CentOS. So much so that they got control of CentOS. So at a certain point after the IBM buyout, they killed CentOS. So the last CentOS that is a true CentOS is CentOS 8.4, I believe it is. At least it's one of the version 8s. There is no version 9 CentOS. Then Red Hat started something called CentOS Stream. But CentOS Stream isn't built from Red Hat Linux. CentOS Stream is built from Fedora, and now Red Hat Linux is built from CentOS Stream. So they're done in a different order. They're still very compatible. I've never used CentOS Stream, but it should be very good Linux. I just haven't used it. If that makes sense. Okay, the people who developed CentOS were, well, I should go back here and say one of the problems with CentOS is scientific users and research labs started to use CentOS a lot. Red Hat was cool with that. Then companies like Facebook said, why should we pay for Red Hat when we can use CentOS for free? And, Red Hat's got to make money. And they were ticked off when these big companies with these huge server farms said, me too, we're just use CentOS for free of charge. And while I'm a little annoyed with Red Hat, that was a very legitimate complaint. They need to make money, and people like Facebook should be paying for their, they should, they should be paying. I'm sorry. This is definitely opinion, but you're getting what open source people feel here. So the result is they killed Red Hat killed CentOS, but some of the CentOS developers who had been promoting it as open source in the first place didn't like that, so they quit their jobs at Red Hat and started companies. The two companies they started was Rocky Linux and Almar Linux. They are both built on Red Hat, and they both look like good distributions built on Red Hat. And now Red Hat has changed their licensing, making it very difficult for those two companies. But I have been using Almar Linux. It's very good. I have also used Rocky Linux some. It's also very, very good. The version I used had one itty bitty little problem, so I'm using Almar Linux instead. Rocky Linux is probably equally good at this point, but I already chose Almar Linux. So for this course, if you really don't know what to choose, I would either use Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Almar Linux. Probably the major advantage to Almar Linux from a practical point of view over Red Hat Linux is it will never ask me to put in a license number. You get the license number for free from Red Hat Enterprise Linux, so it's not a problem. The other issue is if I want to run more than 16 systems using a Red Hat Linux, I think I have to. I'd have to read my documentation, but I think I have to pay once I get to system 17. And I do sometimes run quite a few systems. I'm under the 16, but So I'd recommend those two distributions, or any of those other or any of the other Red Hat distributions if you really want to. But if you're not sure which one to choose one of those two. Okay. Now, if we go to, I just want to show you this site here. There's a site called distrowatch.com. Distrowatch.com just simply keeps track of Linux distributions. Well, the truth is some of these aren't Linux because I think FreeBSD is in the list. FreeBSD is yet another Unix-like operating system that is not using the Linux kernel. It uses the FreeBSD kernel. That is actually the kernel that is being used by Apple for the Apple operating systems. Although Apple modifies the kernel. But most of these are Linuxes. There's Rocky Linux, there's, and why are there so many? Well, a lot of these do something really well. And people use them because they do something particularly well. Linux Mint is really a very easy to use system. I usually recommend Linux Mint to people that haven't used Linux before and like to want a taste of Linux. It's Windows people are comfortable with it. Debian is really nice. It's a little hard to use, but it's really nice because it's a really pure open source distribution. It is purely open source. So if I'm going to build a distribution and I want a clean base to work from, would probably do it from Debian. Well, Ubuntu is a very popular distribution. Manjaro used to be called Mandrake, and it's fairly popular in France. Fedora, that's our good Red Hat thing. Notice Red Hat's not on the list because it's kind of paid, or because of the payment issues. OpenSUSE. Notice SUSE Enterprise is not on the list for the same reason, but OpenSUSE is. Kali Linux, Almar Linux. I thought I saw Rocky Linux down here. Well, anyway, Alpine Linux is up on this list someplace. Why is it good? It is good because it works really well on small systems, or very small systems. So a lot of people that are running in the cloud like to use Alpine Linux because it's small and efficient. So it's very popular for that. Kali Linux is popular because it does computer forensics really well. So all of these, what I'm saying is the reason we have a lot of different distributions is a lot of them have special purposes. They do something really well that other distributions don't do. It's like why in my front yard, I have a minivan sitting beside my truck. When I want to haul a load of gravel, I don't do it in my minivan. When I want to haul people, I use my minivan. It's the same deal with Linux distributions. Okay. Well, that's the basics there. Next thing, let's talk a little bit about VirtualBox. There is software in the world that goes under the name of hypervisor. What hypervisors are, hypervisor is a piece of software, I interjected, is a piece of software that allows you to run multiple operating systems in virtual machines. And that's what it does. There's also something called containers that we'll talk about later. The problem with containers are more efficient. They work slick, they're more efficient. They've gotten really popular in recent years. But containers, you're running something that looks a little like an operating system, but it is using the kernel of the mother operating system. So you're actually just using the same operating system. You can't run a Windows container on a Linux machine, or you can't actually run a Red Hat computer on an OpenSUSE machine, even though they're both Linuxes, because of kernel issues. Whereas with a hypervisor, you can. And that's why we will be sticking with the hypervisor. There's type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. At least they tell us there's type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. A type 1 hypervisor is where your computer does nothing but has virtual computers on it. They like to tell us there is no operating system on the computer. It's just a little piece of software that runs virtual computers. That's the only thing it does. but obviously there is a little operating system there. So I'm not sure the distinction between type 1 and type 2 hypervisors is that big a deal. A type 2 hypervisor is like VirtualBox. It's a piece of software running on our normal computer that will allow you to run another operating system on your normal computer, which may also, and your normal computer may also be doing things like word processing and running Chromium or whatever, as well as running the virtual computer. I think the distinction isn't quite as clear as the literature says it is, because sometimes they blend together a little more than, but that's okay. In any case, we'll be using VirtualBox. VMware is another hypervisor that is a very good one that is commercially available. KVM is one that Linux people use. It's Linus's favorite hypervisor. In fact, he built a lot of KVM. Zen is another one. I don't know. There's a lot of them out there. Zen is, all the ones I mentioned are used a lot. Okay, VirtualBox. You can get VirtualBox if you don't have it by going to virtualbox.org and downloading the software. And it is available for all of these operating systems up here, which basically it's available for most operating systems, from Linux to Macs to Windows to Solaris, if anyone has a Solaris computer anymore yet. Wow, there's one for OpenBSD. OpenBSD is another, I just said FreeBSD was an open source Unix-like operating system that is not Linux. Another one of those is called OpenBSD. It's a very small, very secure, it's a very secure operating system, Unix-like operating system with a very, very small following. I can't remember the lead developer. He's out of Calgary, Canada, and he's got a Dutch name. And he's a good guy. And mostly what it's used for is things like firewalls and things that need to be very, very secure and don't have a lot of fancy applications. Okay. So you get VirtualBox, you download it on your machine. Once you've downloaded VirtualBox to your machine, you can bring it up on your machine, which I do. I'm a Unix guy, so I use command line. And it will bring up something like this. Then if I want to make a new computer, I can either go here or I can go, I think up here someplace. What's add? I don't know. Anyway, we'll make a new computer. And I'm not quite familiar with this at the moment. They've added a couple questions because I just updated VirtualBox. But let's start by making this Almar test. We'll call this Almar test computer. I can actually put spaces in here if I want. There we go. It says, where do you want to put this computer? And it's got a default location. That's fine. And then it wants me to put in remember we downloaded the Red Hat image, or if we want Almar Linux, we could go to Almar Linux downloads. So download, so I can download my image, which I won't worry about, especially because that takes several minutes. Okay, anyway, I think I actually have a copy of Almar Linux here, so we will that is the DVD image for it. I don't know. We're going to do attended installation. Okay, then it will ask me how much base memory I want to use for my computer, and it will default to something, and the defaults sometimes aren't correct, so you know I'll have to decide. Okay, how much memory you want to use? Most modern Linux distributions, and I'm really glossing over things here. If you use Alpine Linux, you can get by with maybe 128 megabytes of memory. I'm not sure, but something very small. But most modern distributions like Red Hat, Almar Linux, CentOS, OpenSUSE would like you to have at least 2 gigabytes of RAM. Many of them will not install unless you have 2 gigabytes of RAM. Sometimes I don't have that much RAM to spare entirely, and what I will do is I will use 2 gigabytes of RAM to do my installation, and then afterwards I will cut it back as much as I can. Number of CPUs you want it to use. Number of CPUs is actually, you count your CPUs by the number of CPUs you have times the number of cores you have per CPU. On my machine, I have well, I have 8 cores, so I can count that as 8 CPUs. I don't want to use all 8 of them because I have the base operating system running. So I probably don't want to use more than a couple core. You can actually change some of this stuff after you're running too. But let's move this up to 2 core. Most of your modern operating systems say they require 2 core in the documentation, but if you cut them back to 1 core, they run just fine. I certainly want 2 core to do the installation, or it will take forever. Create a virtual hard drive now. How big should we make this hard drive? I'd make it at least 10 gigabytes. Let's leave it at 20 gigabytes. But for most Linuxes, you want them to be at least 10 gigabytes. 20 is better. Some of the very small Linuxes like Alpine, you can, you know, maybe 2 gigabytes. You can really push it down. But but believe me, for Red Hat, Almar Linux, you're going to need 10 to 20 gigabytes. Use existing virtual hard drive. No, we're not going to do that. That's if you already have one built. Well, I want a virtual drive. I need one. Okay. Now I've got a new computer here. So since I have a new computer, I basically need to start that, and I need to do the installation. To do the installation, I probably am going to need to go, it says I'm using 3 CPU. I thought I was going to use 2. Well, 3 is fine. Where's storage? Here's storage. Let's, there. Okay, under storage, this is where my DVD is. If I did not specify a DVD, or if I specified the wrong DVD, I can change it here and specify a different DVD. This one is fine. This is my hard drive that's going to be used for the installation, so that's fine. So let's start this. And I'm afraid I haven't done these in a while. Let's install. Now, the latest version of Almar, I'm sure, Linux, I'm sure, is version 9. I just happen to have 8.5 on my hard disk here. Okay, has anybody gone through this and have any questions? Oh, wait, Ian, you have your hand raised.
Oh, that was earlier. I was just saying, I believe the biggest difference between the hypervisors is just performance.
Yes, there's also there is performance issues. Although all the ones I mentioned perform very well, well enough that I think almost all the ones I mentioned are used commercially, with the notable exception of VirtualBox. VirtualBox is a great hypervisor for educational usage. I don't know of anyone doing a lot of production using VirtualBox. VMware is widely used, Xen is widely used, KVM is widely used commercially by people like Facebook and whoever.
Mine just says boot. And so I downloaded the Linux, the one online. And so now it just says boot and it wants me to type something in. Is that even the right way to do that?
Which distribution?
Just the one on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux download.
It should boot automatically.
Yeah, it's asking me to type stuff in. So maybe did something wrong.
I'll try it again. It should boot automatically. And maybe it did boot and boot you into a diagnostic mode.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
When it first comes up on a lot of these operating systems, I'm sorry, I can't remember the Red Hat one, but on a lot of them, you have to use your cursor to move up or down in a menued list, and sometimes the default is to go into a diagnostic software. Other times the default is boot the operating system or do the install. I think a lot of them are a little leery of making the install be the default. And I will say the problem with that, I made the install the default in a distribution that I wrote. And that proved to be a mistake because when people didn't type anything, this was a very automated system. It would boot the DVD and reformat their hard drive. That's not a good thing. You don't want to reformat a person's hard drive without asking questions.
Yeah, it just kind of pops up and it says install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9.2. And then it's like underneath that, it says like test this media and install Red Hat. And then it says automatic boot in 21 seconds. So that's what happened last time.
I think when that menu comes up, you probably have to press an up arrow to get it to make it do the install. I think
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah,
by default, it's going into that test mode or the diagnostic mode.
Okay, there we go. That worked.
In fact, if you noticed when I booted the Almar Linux, it did the same thing. It comes up and the default is diagnostics. And I had to press an up arrow to make it go into the install.
Okay, perfect. Now it just asked me for what language I want. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's installing. I think it will take, there, it asked a language. Now I'm actually into installing the software. We'll take American English. Now, it does a funny thing. It asked me whether I want to capture the mouse. If I press capture the mouse, that mouse is trapped in this little window unless I press the right control key, then I can get it to go out of that window. But while I'm in this window, it brings up the thing that says, do you want to capture the mouse? Yes. Then the mouse is only good in this window. Later on, it will you'll get a chance to install guest additions. Everything will work much better if you install guest additions, and you won't have that problem. But when you do the install, you do have that problem, and the graphics is not nearly as nice as after you install guest additions. Do you actually have to have guest additions? Let me say, you will want guest additions, but sometimes you will end up running, if you're, in your case, you will want to add guest additions because you're going to use this a lot. But sometimes if you're running a weird Linux, like Alpine Linux, there may not be any guest additions, in which case that's not an option. But usually I would be using that distribution for something where I wouldn't care. Okay. Now I've got to go down and take care of some of these things here, make sure everything's set right. Date and time. We probably want Pacific time. You need to set up, I need to set up networking. Networking, let's see what we've got. I think that will give me networking. Now that just gets the IP number automatically, but Most of these look like they're set right. It asked me for a root password. So remember your root password once you give it a root password. Give it a strong root password, unlike me. And, you know, type it in right. Installation. And this gives you a chance to do your partitioning, and we'll talk about partitioning later. This gives you a chance to do custom partitioning or just do the automatic partitioning. We'll just leave it automatic. User creation. I might as well create a user. We'll call this Almar. Password. I'll never remember the password. We'll make it Almar. That's a terrible password, but. And then we begin the installation. That's all there is to it. Now, we're just about out of time. So let me go. I got to hit the right key control to get out of that window. Let me go over here and let's hit this guy. This will bring up another machine I have that's running Almar Linux. Let me move that to a different desktop. Okay, it's running here. Now, this is what your Red Hat will look like, except it will say Red Hat at the bottom or something like that. Okay, it's up, it's running. This is exactly what it will look like. If I want to go, oh gosh, I forget how you run these things now. What is this? If you type the right control key and an F, that gives you the option of going to full screen mode. So I am now in full screen mode. This looks like exactly like what Almar Linux would look like if I brought it up on a bare bones hardware machine. This is exactly what it looks like. If I pull down my menu here, let's go to Firefox. Now, Chromium is not installed by default. You can install Chromium, but I guess I have not. Maybe I have, I don't know. But here is my web browser. If I want to go to Linux Weekly News, this is a good site for news in the open source world. There's other sites, but I like Linux Weekly News. Um, okay. There's another site that I was not aware of until the other day called opensource.com. Or is it .org? .com, I think. Yeah. Okay, I don't know what the future of this site is. This site is supported by Red Hat. As part of Red Hat's changes, they just took down most of the info. This was a great site. They just took down much of the information that is on this site. They are actually giving it to a third-party nonprofit to run under a new name. What used to be opensource.com is no longer opensource.com. And I don't know what's going to become of it. It looks like it's going to be a very Red Hat site, but it's probably going to be a very good site in the future anyway. But I just want you to know, if you read things about what opensource.com used to be, well, it's different from what it is today. Just like Twitter today is different than Twitter was yesterday. Okay. Well, that said and done, let's type control, right control shift by with the F key. And I'm out here. Okay. Let's go back here. And basically we're 8 minutes past where I should be. I think we're done for the day. And I will try to make get a recording of this and get it up online, and maybe even go through and clean up some things and things like that. And if you have any questions,
I didn't really have time to look over everything in the D2L course, Shell, but if we want to make an appointment with you, if we need help, do you have like Calendly? I don't know how to pronounce it, but Calendly to sign up for like either a Zoom session or?
yes, email me or talk to me now. We can do a Zoom session anytime. Now, I will say I do have office hours. They're going to be kind of weird this term. They are posted on the site. It's from 2 to 4 on Tuesdays, 8 to 9 on Thursday, and by appointment and anytime. When do you want to do that?
Oh, I was just curious. I wind up making a mistake and I had to delete the virtual machine. I'll try again a little bit later, but just in case if I have issues, I was just seeing if you're available. So thank you.
Yes, I am quite available.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to verify that the weekly assignments, they're due on Wednesday of the next week.
Yes, people before, I had them being due in 1 week, but last couple terms, people have asked me for a couple more days, so they're due 1 week in 1 week plus 2 days,
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
making it Wednesdays.
Awesome. Thank you.
Also, we will probably have to discuss we're going to have to play the quizzes by ear. I don't know how those are going to work yet because the textbook is a little different than the quizzes were. So, but we'll play that by ear. They won't be a problem. Okay, let me stop the recording.